Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. November 21st, 2017.
Welcome back in, folks. Good to have you with us. Hour number 3 on a Tuesday at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in, and we are joined by State Representative Jeff Deal from Plymouth. Talk about the great tradition and history of this country. There's nothing more traditional or great than Plymouth, and of course Plymouth Rock, and getting there, I believe, in 1619, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, no, Representative Deal is not one of those who got here at that time. Representative Deal, it's good to have you on the program. How
Mike,
are
how
you?
you doing? Yeah, the parade was this last Saturday. A great chance for people to show up and celebrate. It's going to be 400th anniversary coming up soon, so it's pretty amazing down there.
Yeah, a couple of years. Well, it's great to have you on the program, and I know you're a good friend of not only Jeff Kuhner's, but of WRKO generally, and you've been on the station a good deal, so we're glad to have you here. I received an email from your office, which is why I asked to have you on, because you're obviously running against Elizabeth Warren, and anyone who's running against Elizabeth Warren has my support, except maybe Fidel Castro, but I think it's... let me start before getting to the issues. This is a huge undertaking on your part because she's pretty entrenched. We know the nature of this state. In the Senate, I remember Senator Ed Brooke, who was a fine gentleman, but was more along the lines of, I suppose, a Mitch McConnell, kind of a moderate Republican. And you, as I read and understand you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you pretty much follow a more conservative line along the line of the nationalism that Donald Trump is talking about. Am I correct?
Well, I was the only Republican in the state who endorsed the president and worked as a co-chair during the campaign. The fact of the matter is, though, in Massachusetts, 20,000 Democrats unenrolled to vote for Trump in the primary, and Donald Trump got about 50% of the Republican vote in that primary. It was his largest margin of victory. So the issues he talked about, securing the border, bad trade deals abroad, making sure that we fix healthcare, repeal and replace healthcare, all of that, I think whether you're conservative or not, those Republicans in D.C. should be supporting that. But of course, like you mentioned, I'm running against Elizabeth Warren, who is against any effort to reform what's going on down in D.C., which is a swamp. And in fact, she's probably the main voice of obstruction in just about everything that's going on. So yeah, it's a bit of a task, but I will say this. In 2012, when she came in, it was President Obama who was in office and Governor Deval Patrick. Now we have a Republican governor and President Trump down in Washington. She doesn't have the same crutches to lean on, and she has a record of delivering nothing for the state of Massachusetts. So if you go back, you were talking about Ed Brooke. Well, let's talk about Ted Kennedy, a Democrat who was known for delivering to Massachusetts, morally, certainly not a leader, but when it came to delivering the goods, that's what he did. He worked with Republican presidents or governors to make sure we got the money we needed from D.C. Elizabeth Warren has done nothing, and she shows no intent to work with Republicans in the House, the Senate, or the administration. So if she stays in office, Massachusetts is doomed to never have a seat at the table down in Washington.
No, and she, look, I find her, all right, let's assume she and Bernie are pretty much on the same wavelength. I find sometimes Bernie can be acerbic, but Bernie's, generally speaking, pretty reasonable in the way he has a conversation. I find Elizabeth Warren to be vulgar, debased in the way she talks about her opponents, over the top in her rhetoric. I don't know how you can have a civil conversation with this woman. Am I missing a point?
She wouldn't shake hands with Betsy DeVos after the nomination hearings down in the Senate. And again, she's the same woman that when Congressman Scalise was shot in the hip during that Bernie Sanders, that guy, the shooter, who was targeting Republicans at that baseball practice, she said, I think the next day, that it was Republicans that want blood money from the American people with this health care reform. Her rhetoric divides us all the time. It's not about trying to work together. It's purely about dividing us as people, whether by ethnicity or wealth or, careers. I mean, she says that it's law enforcement that continues to terrorize the African-American community. I mean, how does that make any police officer or first responder feel good about her serving in office? It doesn't. And I think we're seeing now with polling that she's got some high negatives, even in Massachusetts. So I think that this is an opening And I'll remind the listeners to one other thing. You know, when Scott Brown made it very clear that he was going to be the 41st vote against Obamacare, even Massachusetts, which had Romney Care delivered a la Mitt Romney and Ted Kennedy, they still knew that that was not going to be provide any savings, and so they voted for Scott Brown to be that 41st vote. This state will vote their financial best interest. Elizabeth Warren is doing nothing for us. She'll continue to do nothing because she's running for president in 2020. That's the big, open secret that's going on, as people know.
There's supposed to be compassion on that left side, and I never see it. It's very interesting. But listen, as far as I'm concerned, you would be, I hate to use the phrase breath of fresh air, but you would be a staunch person in the Senate who would deal with the real problems we have without being an ideologue the way she is on the left. I mean, she won't allow herself to be, and she apparently has some intelligence, but she doesn't use it to think through a problem and come to the best solution. I mean, why would somebody want open borders, for example? Why would somebody want a sanctuary city where murderers are protected, like Kate Steinle's murderer? Why would we want no rational? It's not even a matter of being left or right. It's a matter of being common sense, protecting the American people, isn't it?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, people who are seniors are not getting that cost of living increase with their Social Security. People, they talk in the state about how we don't have enough money for education. Veterans aren't getting the health care they were promised after serving our country overseas. The fact is, all those dollars in Massachusetts, $1.8 billion every year is going to support those who are here illegally. Around the country, it's $116 billion.
Right.
If we were to tighten our borders, make sure we vet those coming into our country like the president wants, have merit-based immigration, we'd absolutely have people contributing to the economy rather than draining it and making it impossible to take care of the people who've been putting into the system for years and years. I've seen it on Beacon Hill for 7 years. I can see in Washington the same thing needs to happen. You just have to have voices who are willing to use common sense in passing legislation that's going to help American people, and she clearly looks to be helping herself all the time, not the people who elected her into office.
Well, you make the point in some of your releases. She talks about the ugly stew of racism as being her opponents. I mean, this identity politics and this labeling of people. Because you don't want radical jihadists coming in, you're an Islamophobe. Because you want to control crime in the inner cities, you're a racist. At some point, the American people and people of the Commonwealth have to say, this has got to stop. This is dividing us. This is not solving a problem.
Well, and the other thing, too, is the hypocrisy. So we're talking about a woman who says that college is unaffordable for kids, but she charges $350,000 to teach one course at Harvard. She complains that businesses aren't paying women enough in the workplace. Then we found out this last April on Pay Equity Day that she's paying the women in her staff in the Senate office 71 cents on the dollar as compared to what the men are making in that office. She's calling for Republicans to drop out of races, but she won't tell Al Franken, who's admitted to inappropriate behavior, that he should drop out of the Senate. He should resign. She's been on Charlie Rose 8 times. Where is she commenting about Charlie Rose? We got her to at least return the money she took from Harvey Weinstein, but she won't turn back the money she got from Ben Affleck, who admitted to groping women. I mean, it's saying one thing and doing a wholly different thing is what Elizabeth Warren's about. I can promise you this. I've been serving for 7 years. I've been returned to office for 4 different times, 4 different elections by a district that has plenty of Democrats, but sees me as someone who, says what I say I'm going to do, I deliver. And that's the thing. Down in Washington, we need someone who's going to actually work for the people of Massachusetts. Warren is just working for herself. She's flying around the country raising money for Democrats, so she can get that loyalty, so she can make that run in 2020. Let's end her dreams in 2018 by getting her out of the Senate and stopping all this far-left radical craziness.
Well, you're going to have to do a whole lot of work, and you've already started, but I'm sure you understand that you've got to go all over this state, knocking on doors, talking to people, going to meetings, all the rest of it. How much of that have you done so far?
Well, Mike, the good news is we've laid the groundwork. We've actually got over 3,500 volunteers since we started 7 months ago, getting the campaign up and running. So we have a website, dealforsenate.com, DIEHLFOR Senate.com. People are going to that website to volunteer. They can sign up to do that. They can sign up to get a bumper sticker. They can sign up to get a lawn sign, and also find out about events that we're having. So we've been doing this for quite a bit. We've raised a good amount of money so far, and obviously we need to continue to raise money. That's all that Elizabeth Warren seems to actually be about, is raising money for her campaign coffers. Plus, she's written 2 books since she served in office on our dime, and she's made $1.6 million for herself. So I've got my work cut out for me. But look, it's a great group of people that I'm working with. This is the same grassroots team, the core people that worked on that gas tax ballot question back in 2014, where we repealed an indexed gas tax and ultimately saved taxpayers $2 billion. That's what the Boston Globe blamed me for not giving to government. But the fact is we returned $2 billion back into the pocket of taxpayers by not having their gas tax go up every year. We've saved them that tax increase 3 different years now in a row, and we're going to continue to get savings if you send me down to Washington to represent you in the U.S. Senate.
What is your sense, being in the state legislature as you are, about over the 7 years you've been there? Has there been any change in ideology in the Senate? Are the Democrats more open now than they were when you first got there in terms of trying to solve problems together? What's your sense about that?
Well, Mike, the way that Deval Patrick tried to solve problems when I first got in was to raise taxes. He actually proposed the largest increase in the history of Massachusetts, a $2 billion tax increase package in 2013, which is where that gas tax was actually bundled in, and we luckily got that out and repealed it. But, since Charlie Baker's taken over as governor, the Democrats, for a while it seemed sort of tucked in their spending. Now they're actually trying to, increase spending and also increase taxation. So you've got some bills in there, and there's actually going to be a ballot question in 2018 called the millionaire's tax that all the Democrats in the legislature voted to allow to get out for a vote, which is to add an additional 4% tax to anybody making an arbitrary number, in this case $1 million or more. And what that's going to do, as it did in other states that have passed similar legislation, is drive those folks with money who use it to invest back into their businesses or invest in Massachusetts. You drive those folks out of the state either physically or at least their money leaves the state. That's what we've seen. That's where money will go away from where it's going to be taxed at a higher rate. So Massachusetts is about to make a major mistake. And look at Connecticut. The more they've raised taxes, the more financially they're in trouble because they're not bringing in estimated revenue that they thought it would do. And in fact, it's going down. So Massachusetts is right now making a lot of mistakes with the legislature. I hope in 2018, when I'm running for U.S. Senate, we get a lot of good candidates that run to try to break the imbalance up on Beacon Hill, because this is the same Beacon Hill that, they're talking about having all these problems financially, like I said, with education and transportation, yet they gave themselves an $18 million pay increase as the first thing they did when they convened in this 2-year session. So, just so for the record, I voted against that, and obviously I'm not taking the pay increase. But the fact of the matter is the Democrats who control the House and Senate in the supermajority have no intent on actually trying to help people save money in the state. They're purely about raising and spending more all the time.
Well, I remember what you just said about the pay raise happened. They haven't changed the Democrats, because when Dukakis was governor, he signed a pay raise bill for the legislators when he was going to run for president, so he'd try to get their support in the state. And then he went out the back door so that he would avoid the media on a Friday afternoon when he signed the bill. So they're still doing the same thing, taking money from the public without justification, because they're not balancing the budget within reasonable means. They have to balance the budget, but of course they do that by raising taxes. And now that's, as you suggest, what they're intending to do. Don't they ever realize that when you take money out of the private sector and give it to government, that it's not productive because government can't create a productive economy?
Well, that's the other thing. I'm working with Retailers Association of Massachusetts to reduce the sales tax from 6.25% back down to 5%. You've got businesses in this state. Drive around, take a look at downtown Fitchburg, take a look at downtown Leominster. You've got cities around and towns around the state of Massachusetts, and I've been crisscrossing it everywhere, who are really having problems keeping their downtowns, keeping those storefronts full of businesses. And so what's happened is you have the internet that's cutting into a lot of these retailers, the brick and mortar. You also have New Hampshire to the northern border with no sales tax. And yet what does Beacon Hill do? They ended up 10 years ago raising the sales tax to 6.25%. That really hurt a lot of those retailers. We're actually just finished delivering signatures so that it will make the ballot in 2018 to reduce the sales tax from 6.25% to 5%. And I think that's going to be a huge asset to the people of the state because it's going to put money back into their households. Sales tax, like the gas tax, is regressive. It hits those families with lower incomes as compared to folks with higher incomes. It's just a smaller percentage. It's something that, again, I think it's important to do to make sure that Massachusetts remains affordable.
You mentioned, I used to teach at Fitchburg State, and I lived in Leominster, so I know both of those cities. And, yeah, they've had economic problems, and it is tough to keep those storefronts open. We'll come right back with State Representative Jeff Deal. He's running against Elizabeth Warren for the United States Senate seat. Glad to get your questions for him. If you have a question you want to ask Representative Deal about his campaign for the United States Senate against Elizabeth Warren, what a godsend that would be for him to replace her, to say the least. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. Glad to get your calls. You can ask him questions directly, comments if you want. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner today at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
These cuts are blood money. People will die. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
What a liar. What an out-and-out liar. Illegal aliens come to this country and get treated in emergency rooms without even having the right to be here, because that's the law. Anyone who goes into an emergency room has to get treated. And so don't tell me, Warren, that anybody's going to lose their life. Nobody has lost. Name one. Why don't you call the program right now, Elizabeth Warren? Name one person who lost their life because of alleged health care problems with the system, or what would happen with the system. It wouldn't change. The emergency room would still be there for everybody. We are here with Representative Jeff Deal. He is running against that woman, as Bill Clinton said about Monica Lewinsky. Good to have you with us. We'll go to some calls for the representative in his campaign for the United States Senate. Becky in Wenham. Hello, Becky. You're on WRKO. Go right ahead.
Hi. Thanks so much for taking my call. I just wanted to know, for someone who can't financially do a lot for the hopefully next senator's campaign, how can we, with just getting the word out, and I want to know how Elizabeth Warren votes. Where do I find that information so it's easy for me to just have a rebuttal to all the constant, anti-everything that I hear from people in this state who don't know the truth, but then I can't articulate it to show them. And I was wondering if there was a place where I could really go to look at a succinct just write-up of this is bad for us, this is bad for us, and she's voted for this. And is there anything like that out there?
Okay, thank you for calling. Two questions. How can she help without money? And where does she find Elizabeth Warren's record to resist her friends?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Becky, I appreciate the call. First of all, dealforsenate.com, DIEHLFOR Senate.com is where you go to sign up to be involved. It doesn't have to be a donation, although we certainly are happy to take that. But we actually have a lot of events going on that we could use your help at, banner holdings, things like that. November 28th at 6:30, coming up very soon, we're going to have a big event at the Great Chow in Abington. It's my biggest announcement yet, so I'm hoping people can come to that. So if you get there, you can be a part of that exciting event. But there'll be a lot to do. As far as Elizabeth Warren and her votes, one of the things that we've done is we created a page called Where's Warren? It's on Twitter and it's on Facebook. And what we do with Where's Warren is we not only highlight bad votes, but we also talk about where she is or where she isn't in Massachusetts, because she really spends, like I said, a lot of time out of state fundraising for other Democrats and for herself. Here's a woman that says, she wants to get big money out of politics, and yet she's raised $13 million so far. Like I said, she's made $1.6 million on books that she's written. Personally, she's made that money. So, Becky, getting her record out there, we're going to continue to push that, and Where's Warren is a place that you can go to find out all the activities she's doing and a lot of the very questionable votes that don't help the people of Massachusetts.
Tracy, Becky for calling. Tracy, you're on WRKO with our guest, Representative Deal. Very quickly, got about a minute. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. I got your bumper sticker on the back of my truck, and I tell everybody about you. I had the pleasure of meeting your father-in-law, who was actually scraping a house in 80-degree heat.
He's a hard worker. He's retired.
He's a working guy, and It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hey,
Well, thank you for calling, sir. Well, you've as you get around and you get more momentum, more and more momentum, it's like being under the radar. I knew a great political advisor years ago who said that the idea of, and in your case you can't knock on doors, but running, for example, for a mayor's race, knocking on doors, in your case going to events in all the communities around the state, like you mentioned Fitchburg and Leominster, and maybe going to other areas of the state and getting connections with people, getting to know people. The more you do that, the more energy there is, and the more you keep in touch with people, sending little cards to constituents or to people around the state about events that are taking place in their area. You know all of what to do, and obviously that's going to build a lot of emotion, a lot of interest, a lot of generating of response to your campaign, and with that, we wish you great success with it.
Well, thanks, Mike. And look, it's a great team of people I'm working with. My wife is a huge supporter. She and I own a small business. We have 2 wonderful daughters, and my father-in-law that Tracy mentioned. Everybody's really in it to win it because we think that we can really do a much better job representing the people of this state, which we love. The opportunities we've had here in Massachusetts are incredible, and so I'm looking forward to doing everything I can to unseat Elizabeth Warren in November of 2018, and I hope folks get involved. So thank you very much, Mike, for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. Best wishes to you. I know you're going to work hard, and that's the key, and we'll look forward to your success. Representative Deal, thanks for being with us, and have a great day, and congratulations on the campaign as well.
Thanks again, Mike.
We look forward to seeing success. In the meantime, we're going to get all the latest news and come right back. Lots to talk about with CBS and Charlie Rose and Representative John Conyers, those left-wingers who seem to want to take advantage of women. Stay with us. Back we are. Good to have you with us. 2:36. Good afternoon, folks. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner today at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. By the way, I'll mention again, if you get a chance to take a look at a book on talk radio, I like to think the one I wrote is right on point about the power of this vehicle and the experiences we've had over the years in doing campaigns that have led to changes in both local and national issues, including stopping a congressional pay raise. The book is called Airing the Wave, and it's one I wrote over a period of a couple of years, actually. I wanted to make the point that talk radio is a very powerful force in the media. It's a place where people can have access. Airing the Wave, and if you get a chance, it's at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or any of the other websites where you can pick up a copy, hardcover or paperback. I'm going to get to your calls in a moment, but I want to just lay out the latest breaking news about Charlie Rose. I mentioned at the top of the hour that CBS not only suspended him, but actually fired him. And now PBS has not only suspended him, but they've fired him. And Bloomberg has said they have severed ties completely with Charlie Rose. So he's finished at all 3. And it's a sad story, but here's another guy, another liberal, who is supposed to be compassionate, supposed to be caring about people. I thought that was what liberalism was about in this country, and we see with Elizabeth Warren talking about her in the last half hour how harsh people can be, and the same thing with Charlie Rose. Comes across on the air very gently and politely, but that wasn't Charlie Rose. CBS said a short time ago we terminated Charlie Rose's employment with CBS News effective immediately, and they talk about it evolving out of the extremely disturbing and intolerable behavior said to have revolved around his PBS program. PBS has now said, in light of yesterday's revelations, PBS has terminated its relationship with Charlie Rose and canceled distribution of his programs. Bloomberg TV confirmed as well it severed its ties with Charlie Rose. There are allegations, which he has acknowledged, about groping female acquaintances, walking around naked in their presence. They were either employees at the Charlie Rose show or wanted to work for the show, and these allegations go from the late 90s to 2011. 3 women on the record, 5 anonymous. The other 5 didn't want to have their names public. 2 of the women confirmed their stories on a network on Monday night, Kyle Godfrey Ryan and Megan Crate. On Tuesday, CBS This Morning co-host Gayle King, where he worked, said she was really grappling with the accusations, calling them horrible. Ms. King said he doesn't get a pass because I can't stop thinking about the anguish of these women. And they are obviously astonished by all of this. Ms. King said, "This was not the man I know." She said, "But I'm also clearly on the side of the women." Rose issued apologies. He said he prided himself in his 45 years in journalism on being an advocate for the careers of the women with whom I've worked. In the past few days, claims have been made about my behavior towards some former female colleagues. He said, "I hear these women and I deeply apologize for my inappropriate behavior." And he's finished, basically, at all three of those networks and probably finished for good in the media. The suspensions had occurred Monday night at PBS and CBS. Now they've officially fired him. According to one of his assistants, Kyle Gottfried Ryan, told the Washington Post that Rose allegedly walked naked in front of her at least a dozen times while she was working in one of his homes in New York City. A dozen times. I mean, it's one thing to have somebody come over to your home to work with you, but you walk around naked a dozen times? What is that about? She said, Ms. Godfrey Ryan also said that Charlie Rose would call her repeatedly late at night or early in the morning to ask her about her sex life and describe a very specific repetitive fantasy of her disrobing and swimming naked in a pool at his suburban home in Bellport, New York, as he watched. She was in her early 20s at the time. Ms. Godfrey Ryan said, "It feels branded into me," the details of it. Amazing. These women were ages 21 to 37. Let's go to your calls. And glad to, by the way, John Conyers is another one. He claims it didn't happen, but apparently the office of John Conyers, 88 years old now, paid a woman over $27,000 to settle a complaint of a woman who was fired from his Washington staff because she rejected his sexual advances. And there was a confidentiality agreement. Now he denies it ever happened. Paul Ryan, the speaker, calls the report extremely troubling. Maybe John Conyers is next to go, and of course we know about Al Franken, and the beat goes on. Jim, you're on WRKO. Good afternoon to you. Hello.
Hello, Mike. How you doing, Jay?
I'm trying to figure this out.
No, I don't know. You're never going to make sense out of nonsense, Mike. I can tell you that right now. I've been around, and I'll tell you, here I am in my 60s, okay? And, you can never make sense out of nonsense, And as far as the nitwits walking around, or supposedly walking around naked, I can't say one way or the other. I was not there, and I have no proof.
Well, he didn't deny it. Charlie Rose did not deny that.
Well, maybe he did. Who the hell knows? You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. They're all cracked. We all know this. And then, you got Liz Warren out there. She's another one. And then I understand that most people are under the impression that she's a woman. And that's totally false. I mean, speculatively speaking, I swear that she was kidnapped, or it was kidnapped from Russia, probably a Russian male, forced to undergo, sexual reassignment surgeries and everything else.
Well, we don't know that, but listen, that's beyond the pale. There's enough about Elizabeth Warren to attack without creating fantasies about her. So I appreciate the call, but thank you. Howie on the South Shore, you're on WRKO, the voice of Boston. Hello.
Yes, good afternoon. Welcome. First of all, I don't condone this behavior of Charlie Rose or whomever. But since Adam and Eve, this has been going on. But the last few months, to hear it over and over and over at the same time, it's taking the news cycle beyond. This is craziness. The fact is, I don't condone it. It goes back to Adam and Eve. But in the meantime, we're ignoring the real news that's affecting us: the opiate situation, homelessness, what's happening in the Middle East, and so forth and so on. I think it's ridiculous. And again, I don't condone this behavior. I never got involved with this behavior. I go back to I served in the military in the 60s, what have you. But this is what all the media has to talk about.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we had Scott Rasmussen here about the Republicans having a possibility of losing the Senate in 2018. We had Harry Amiat here, an attorney who's representing a woman who's being attacked by Planned Parenthood because she revealed the truth about what they're doing in selling body parts of babies, the fetuses. So I'm not sure. We've been talking about a variety of other things here in this program. Obviously, as these stories break, if you're talking about the mainstream media, as the stories break, they've got to be covered. I mean, this just broke during this hour that Charlie Rose has now been fired by 3 organizations. And I'm sure he'll enjoy his retirement, but his reputation is gone. He had a pretty good reputation, clearly on the left, but was journalistically considered pretty good. Now, that's all gone. Paul in Woburn, you're on WRKO, the Voice of Boston, with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Hello.
Mike, I want to wish you happy Thanksgiving. You're filling in admirably for the Jeff Kuhner.
Thank you, sir.
What bothers me so much, Mike, is with human nature. The left, meaning basically Democrats, have been blinded. I don't know if it's hypocrisy. I don't know if it's moral cowardice. I try to be objective, okay? I happen to be a Christian. I happen to be Catholic. I don't want any scandals covered up. And let's face it, the Catholic Church, will hardly ever get its reputation back after the abuse that took place. Now we have Democrats which claim that war on women, and yet who seem to be some of the biggest offenders? And this goes back to President Clinton, President Kennedy, and so it's basically a farce. It's just you can just poke so many holes through it that it has no foundation because it's a lie. As long as liberal Democrats continue to play into this abortion, which they think is a sacrament, God forbid we have more adoption, which Colin Kaepernick was adopted, by the way. You think you'd bring up that issue instead of going into other nonsense, whether you call it a red herring. So these things are just so disturbing and troubling because there's no reason or logic to it. So women that claim that men are, chasing them around the office and making it difficult for them, who are the men that are guilty of this?
Well, we're naming them. I appreciate the call, and it's a good point you make, Paul, and I thank you. But they're making it very uncomfortable. The reason I bring up Charlie Rose and John Conyers and Al Franken is because these are smug, arrogant fellows. They think on that left-wing side of the aisle, they know it all. They think they have all the answers to the world's problems. And anybody who doesn't agree with them is kind of a grain of sand on the beach. They're insignificant because they have all the answers. Elizabeth Warren can be included in that category of thinking she has the answers and everybody else is wrong. Well, John Conyers is now being held accountable at 88 years old. Charlie Rose is now being held accountable at 75. Al Franken's being held accountable as a United States Senator. And it's about time. Bill Clinton's finally being held accountable. Now he can't walk down the street without people looking shamefully at him because of what he did in raping Juanita Broaddrick. And it wasn't even about Monica Lewinsky in my mind. It's about Juanita Broaddrick. Lewinsky was a voluntary situation, as bad as it was, and it was detestable. But Juanita Broaddrick was a violent rape of her, folks. Let's go to Joe in Methuen. Hello, Joe. You're on WRKO, the Voice of Boston.
Hey, Mike. Thank you. Mike, don't you find it a little peculiar when all these stories are coming out? Now, you take it about Charlie Rose. He works side by side with Gayle King, who is best friends with Oprah Winfrey, one of the most powerful women in media and probably, in the United States.
Right.
You're telling me that you go to any business and somebody does something remotely wrong and the whispers start to float around. They all the people who knew him, who knew Anthony Weiner, who knew Bill Clinton, who knew Harvey Weinstein, they all could have pulled the plug on it. They all could have said something years ago, and they all stayed silent. They're all a bunch of hypocrites. It's ridiculous. They have to wait until it gets out in the public for them to condemn these actions. They could have condemned them on a daily basis, working side by side with that person.
Well, that's true.
They never did. They never did.
I don't know how much Gayle King knew. She claims that she just learned this. Who knows?
She claims she just learned it, but she's on the set, and people work, people talk. And if a guy is walking around naked in front of people, those stories get out.
No, I understand, and maybe it could be. I appreciate the call and making the point, and I thank you. It may be that the woman who had that imposed upon her by Charlie Rose, his walking around naked, it may be that she was afraid to say anything to anybody because she didn't want to lose her position. She was at a low-level position, and these were interns and people who worked for Charlie Rose, and you become intimidated. So it maybe didn't get to Gayle King. Who knows? Whether it did or not, the fact is that it happened, and now it's gotten out. And yeah, if Gayle King knew about it, she should have stopped it in its tracks or reported it in its tracks immediately. So if she knew, she was irresponsible. But we don't know that she knew. She may well not have known because these people didn't want to talk about it. We'll come back to your calls at 617-266-6868. Coming up to 2:50 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Here we are at 2:54 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO, as we talk about the sleazy operation of Charlie Rose and John Conyers and Al Franken, left-wing, smug, and arrogant, all three of them. And they have their comeuppance now. And what is the group on the left going to say about John Conyers now, who would always sit there on his committees in the House and have all of these arrogant comments to make toward people with whom he disagreed, as if they were somehow lower than him, that they didn't have a right to feel the way they did. And now what are you going to say, John Conyers, at 88 years old? We'll go to Jim in Malden. Jim, you're on WRKO, the Voice of Boston. Hello.
Hi, how you doing? It's great to hear your voice. The only issue I have, it kind of cheapens the whole argument. I think it's on both sides. You look at like Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, Eric Rowland, David Hassert, Roy Moore, Larry Craig, Donald Trump. I mean, there's quite a list on both sides. So,
there's no question about that. I'm glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. My only point is that these guys on the left have always been so arrogant and cocky about who they are and that they have the truth and nobody else can have a point of view. Now they're being held accountable.
Look at Bill O'Reilly. Look at Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly denied this stuff forever. $32 million to shut people up. I mean, there's a really bad example right there. And he's talking about being smug and being arrogant and telling everybody how to live.
Well, you're right about O'Reilly, and I've known him over the years and was on his program, as a matter of fact. And he was in a position of great power. He had the #1 rated cable news show in the country. Why he put himself in that position is beyond my understanding. It's puzzling. Lise Wheel, who got the $32 million, was a prosecutor in Seattle, came to Fox, and apparently over a period of time, for $32 million, something must have happened that was very unfortunate. But I'm only bringing up these people now because this is more recent, and now all of a sudden it's hitting the left side of the aisle. But thank you for calling, Jim. Appreciate it. But he's right. No question. It's happened on all sides, and now the latest is over on the left. Joe in Danvers, you're on WRKO, the Voice of Boston. Hello.
Good afternoon. My point is, these men that do these things, they should be dealt with and either civilly or criminally charged, whatever, what have you. But let's look at the other side here, the women. Now, a woman gets groped, harassed, made to feel inferior. She should report that person right away. She doesn't because she's afraid to lose her job.
Yeah.
Well, jobs come, jobs go. Your dignity and respect for yourself should be strong enough to stand up and do what needs to be done. By these women who've been attacked, harassed, groped, when they keep their mouth shut, the next woman that has the same thing happen to them, that's on that first woman. Okay? The problem is that you got women who this happens to them, and it's bad, but they keep their mouth shut because about their job. What about their self-respect and dignity? Quit your job, report it, put these people in jail where they belong, and move on. But no, you keep your mouth shut because your job is more important than your integrity and dignity? Come on. And then wait 40 years to open your mouth? I'm sorry. I find it hard to believe after 40 years that you're still hurt over it.
Well, Joe, in an ideal world, you're correct. The problem is that people have to eat. The other problem is that people want to be in certain kinds of careers. You know, the opportunity to be in the media and to do the work that they have the opportunity to do on the Charlie Rose show, for example. How do you square that in the practical, real world you live in with doing what you said about going public the first time you get groped or the first time you get sexually harassed or intimidated. That's a tough issue for a woman or for anybody. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet and accept certain things and then just simply move on with your job. The young woman who had Charlie Rose parade in front of her about a dozen times, naked, I'm sure wasn't real happy about that. I'm sure she was probably angry, outraged. But she also realized, I have a great job. You know, he happens to be in a great position. Working at CBS, working with PBS, working with Bloomberg. His show being syndicated on 2 of those networks and then CBS Morning News and 60 Minutes. So yeah, in an ideal world, on principle alone, sure, the right thing to do is report it. But if you're in a practical world and you're trying to move up in a career, and all these women were ages 21 to 37, which means they were young women trying to grow and aspire in that career. That's a tough place to be and have to go public and then maybe jeopardize your career. Even if you bring down Charlie Rose, do you bring yourself down as well? So I can understand where those women were and the difficulty of that. Good to be with you. I come back and do it one more time tomorrow. And meantime, have a great Thanksgiving if you're not here tomorrow. Mike Siegel with you for Jeff Kuhner. Be good to yourself and the world will be good to you at the Voice of Boston, WRKO in Boston.
The Voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 93.7 WEEI HD2 Lawrence, Boston. It's 3 o'clock.